Hey, welcome back. So today's video is going to be about the gut-brain connection. And there is a massive connection that we didn't actually know about until about 2004. So in 2004, there was a bunch of studies done with rats, and basically we can get what's called germ-free rats. So basically you can have this rat born with no bacteria in their guts. And then you, as a scientist, can actually select what bacteria you kind of put into these rats and let them grow and gestate as they normally do, which is really, really cool for science. What they found by doing this was by changing the microbia to more of the microbiome, the actual bacteria inside the body. What they found was putting in harmful pathogenic type bacteria dramatically affected the groups of rats that didn't have those beneficial floras put in them from mom. So what they did was when they stressed these rats, their tasks and their performance went down dramatically. So we kind of were able to make this connection between, the gut directly influences the brain. Let me take it a little bit step further. We have basically three connections in our body that have to do with our brain and our guts. So first of all, we have this vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve basically controls everything that your body does from the base of your neck right down to about right below the navel. So pretty much everything that you do, your heart beats in there, your lungs beat in there, your gut's done in there. You have all these different things that are under this vagal brain control. So the brain sends that signal to the vagus nerve to actually innervate the organs and let them do their function as they want. So you have to keep that in mind, that the gut directly interfaces with the brain through that message. And here's what I learned recently. About 80% of the messages sent through the vagus nerve are from the organs to the brain, not from the brain to the organs. So only 20% of the communication going back and forth is the brain telling the organ what to do. 80% of the communication is the organ telling the brain what it needs, what it's done, what it's requiring. These are the things that I find quite interesting with what we're learning about this world of science, and putting these things together is fascinating. So I just told you the vagus nerve and the brain connect the gut, but did you know there's another type of nervous system called the enteric nervous system? And the enteric nervous system, this is where it gets really interesting. Remember I told you that the brain and the organs get signals going back and forth? The enteric nervous system is what your microbiome, your gut, tells your brain to do. So your gut can actually act on its own to regulate its own environment and the brain's environment. So the gut can actually act independently of the brain. It doesn't need to listen to the brain's signals. So that's fascinating when you kind of tie it back into ADD and ADHD, to think what the diet's influence is on that microbiome and how that might be a limiting factor to why your brain won't stay focused and calm. It's kind of interesting. And the last part we have to talk about there is this aspect of what the gut in the right environment does. It's interesting, when the gut's performing the way that it should, and it's not prone to infections and overgrowth of bacteria and yeast and nutrient deficiencies, the gut actually wants to stay calm. The only time the gut will act up is when you eat. So when you kind of think of it in reality, the gut is kind of creating this sense of calm and tranquil environment for the whole body. But unfortunately, so many of us have guts that are just in trauma, which is interesting to kind of put it in perspective, because it's amazing for me to see clinically when I take someone on a certain food plan now that's clearly not working, and change just that habit for 6 weeks, to note the points that along the chain there that are causing that beneficial effect for kids and adults too. It's just absolutely staggering. And to think just by putting things in your mouth that are different can control that whole aspect of your performance, I think is amazing. But so many of us, don't do that, right? Another aspect is, have you heard of your gut called your second brain? Because interesting, it is. It literally has pretty much the same amount of, maybe even more, of nerve cells and communications than your brain does. So inside your gut, the beneficial bacteria inside your gut love to make and eat what's called short-chain fatty acids. So when you eat starches, bacteria actually will create these short-chain fatty acids, and they'll actually become food for other environments, other organisms. And this is the big problem that I see with a lot of people that have allergies. Because interesting, the bad news for you that have allergies and these food reactions and chronic inflammation, how your body will protect yourself is to create a big, thick layer of mucus. And unfortunately, that layer of mucus, which is called mucin, can become food for pathogenic or unfriendly bacteria. And when that starts to occur, that's when food allergy symptoms usually get a lot worse. That's when we see the mucus kind of coming out in the stool. That's when we see sometimes there might be a little bit of blood. That's when we notice the bloating, gas, and fatigue, and the food sensitivities start. Because that layer of mucus that our body has, think if this is the inside part of the cell, right outside is where the blood is circulating all throughout the body, and the gut's job is to take food that you've consumed, break it down into individual components, and send it into the blood to be packaged and put together where it needs to go. So the blood is just waiting through that layer of mucus for a little bit of food to kind of pass through. And unfortunately, if it gets that food undigested, the body can't use it. The immune system starts to react. Boom, you got a food sensitivity or worse. So there's a lot of complex nuances there with the gut, but it comes down to number one, we have to explore what state the gut is in. It's not enough, I don't think, to just give an anti-inflammatory, allergen-free type diet. I don't think that's enough. It's not enough just to run a food sensitivity panel to tell you and your kid how to frame your diet around not having these kind of chronic food sensitivities. Because my question is always, how do those food sensitivities get there? And 99.9% of food sensitivities get there by having a gut environment that's not specific enough for proper digestion. So that's when we need to kind of explore what the underlying causes of that are. And that's when I use stool testing. So bringing in stool testing is an amazing tool that we use in the office here to really dive deep into the layers there to see what's going on that's creating that layer of inflammation that your body's experiencing. So what we do with the stool test, it's called GI map. It's $389 American is what we do for the lab, and I don't charge you for the lab sample. The lab charges you for all the lab work. I don't need to be a middleman on any of that. I don't think that's not our place to do that. But we get the results in 7 days. So once your samples are sent to the lab, 7 days is the turnaround. That's incredible. Right now, previous stool tests are about 3 weeks. So we can get this ball rolling really, really quick here. But looking at the GI map, it covers off so many areas of digestion that are still question marks. So we look at, is there undigested food particles in the stool? We actually measure that layer of mucin, that layer of mucus. What's that number? Tell me how inflamed that gut is. We look at other substances like pathogenic bacteria, chronic infections. We look at things like parasites and worms. We look at those as well. And yeast is a massive, massive issue in our society, basically because of how much sugar we eat. That's going to be our next video. But stool testing really is the treasure map to kind of guide you and me as to how to get out of this trap that you're in. So it's a very, very useful tool. I pretty much recommend it for almost everybody that I see. I don't like guessing. I don't like leaving any stone unturned. I like to get to the root of the cause. And again, this is where the stool test kind of comes into play big time. So that's our little chat about the gut and the brain connection and how they they're interwoven together. And again, you got to keep in mind we have these systems that can work independently. So let's give you an example. So is it just your willpower that won't let you stop eating sugar and chocolate and cake and cookies? Remember, that gut can actually process its own nerve messages. It can actually do its own thing. It can work independently of the brain. So all your willpower you want going in the brain saying no, 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 doesn't really matter if the gut can overwrite that symptom. And if it's doing that, it'll send that message up to the brain and say, I don't care how much willpower you have, go get me sugar. And I'm not going to stop until you go get me sugar. How many of you can relate to that scenario, right? You can think about one thing and you can smell it, you can taste it, you can have all these different things happening inside your mouth, and you can't stop eating it. Because the gut can, like I said, rewire itself to tell the brain, I'm in charge, not you, which is interesting. So that's when we have to dig to the root of it and find what those causes are. So it's fascinating to see how that gut is interwoven with our brains. So thanks for tuning into this video. The next one, we're going to jump into some of the lifestyle issues that I see. We're going to discuss a bunch of cool aspects that you may have not ever even thought of before. Going to be some big words, some little words. I'm going to do my best to put it in context for you, but I want to make sure we get the overriding information here. We need to get this square. Mindset determines outcome, and number two, your gut is in control of this thing. Thanks.